I had forgotten this man existed. We had met once, briefly, about a year earlier, when he responded to an advertisement I posted for a house. I never gave him my personal email. I never gave him my address. As far as I knew, we had spoken once and gone our separate ways. Then one morning I opened my inbox and found an email from him. Not because he had found me on social media, not because he had searched my name. He had somehow found an old anonymous email address that Craigslist had created for an advertisement that had already expired, and he was using it to contact me again. The worst part wasn't that a stranger had remembered me. It was realizing that, while I had completely forgotten him, he had apparently never forgotten me. This happened after I had posted an advertisement on Craigslist to sell a house. It wasn't anything unusual. I was trying to find a buyer, and one of the people who responded was a man I'd never met before. We exchanged a few messages through Craigslist's anonymous email system. Eventually, we spoke briefly about the property. That's it. There was no relationship, no friendship, nothing personal. After the house situation was over, I completely forgot about him. Honestly, if you'd asked me his name a year later, I probably couldn't have told you. That's how insignificant the encounter had been to me. But apparently, it hadn't been insignificant to him. Craigslist used an anonymous relay address when people contacted you. Instead of seeing your actual email address, the other person would see something temporary that forwarded messages to your real inbox. It was meant to provide some privacy. Eventually, my original advertisement expired. The address should have been useless, the conversation should have been over, and for almost a year, it was. Then I started receiving strange emails. At first, I assumed they were spam. The messages were coming through an anonymous Craigslist relay address, and they appeared to be connected to a completely different advertisement, one that I had never posted. The wording made it look like I had responded to a personal advertisement from a man looking for women. I remember staring at the screen thinking, what is this? I hadn't contacted anyone. I hadn't answered the advertisement. I didn't even know the man who had posted it, but somehow the messages were being associated with me. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop: the relay address. It looked familiar. I started digging through old emails, trying to figure out why. That's when I realized what had happened. The man sending the messages wasn't a random stranger. He was the same person who had contacted me about the house almost a year earlier. At some point, he must have copied or saved the anonymous Craigslist address connected to my old advertisement. He had kept it. For months, I had moved on with my life. He apparently hadn't. And now he was using that old address to make it appear as though I had contacted him. The more I thought about it, the more disturbing it became. He wasn't simply sending me unwanted messages. He was creating a false version of events. From the outside, it could look like I had contacted him first, like I had responded to his advertisement, like I knew him, like there was some private conversation between us that I was hiding, but there wasn't. I kept thinking about how easily someone could misunderstand what was happening. A person sees a series of messages. They see my email address attached to them. They see an apparent conversation, and they might never stop to ask how that address got there. That's what frightened me. Not just the messages themselves, but the fact that someone could manipulate the appearance of a relationship that didn't exist. And then things became even more complicated. I already had another person in my life who had a history of crossing boundaries. Someone who was constantly trying to get into my email, my Facebook account, and other private accounts. So now I had two completely separate problems. One person was apparently obsessed with contacting me, and another person was suspicious about what they thought I was doing online. I started getting questions about the Craigslist messages. Who was this guy? Why was he contacting me? Why did it look like I had responded to him? And I remember feeling completely trapped. Because how do you explain something that sounds ridiculous, even when it's happening to you? I didn't contact this man. I barely remember meeting him. He saved an anonymous email address from an advertisement that expired almost a year ago. Even saying it out loud sounded unbelievable. But it was the truth. And the strangest part was how little this man actually knew about me. We hadn't spent time together. He didn't know me personally. There was no history between us. He had simply decided that our brief encounter meant enough to keep pursuing me long after I had forgotten him. That realization changed the way I looked at the entire situation. I started thinking about how much information we casually give away online. A name, an email address, a photograph, a marketplace listing, a social media account. Something that feels temporary to you can become permanent to someone else. You delete the post, you move on, you forget the person, but you don't know what they saved before you did. I started checking my accounts more carefully, changing passwords, looking through login activity, trying to figure out who might have access to what, and every time another email appeared, I felt the same uncomfortable sensation. That feeling that someone was standing just outside the boundaries of your life, watching, waiting, looking for another way in. The messages eventually became less frequent. Then they stopped, but stopping didn't make me feel better, because I knew what had happened. A person I barely remembered had remembered enough about me to keep an old method of contacting me for nearly a year. I sometimes wondered why. What made him save that address? What made him come back to it months later? Was it simply curiosity? Was it an obsession? Was he trying to get my attention? Or had he been waiting for an opportunity to contact me again? I'll probably never know, and that's what bothers me most. Because the entire time this was happening, I kept thinking about how easily I could have missed the connection. If I hadn't recognized the old relay address, I might have assumed it was just another strange internet message. If I hadn't searched through my old emails, I might never have realized who was behind it. And if I had never connected the two events, I would have had no idea that someone I'd forgotten had been keeping a digital thread connecting us. A year had passed. To me, that encounter was nothing. To him, apparently it wasn't. I still think about that whenever I hear someone say that something they posted online is only temporary. Because once information leaves your hands, you don't really know where it goes. You don't know who saves it, you don't know who screenshots it, you don't know who remembers it, and sometimes you don't know who's waiting until you've completely forgotten them before they decide to come back. If you enjoyed tonight's story, let me know by leaving a like. And if you've ever experienced something you still can't explain, share your story in the comments below. Your experience could be featured in a future episode of The Dark Chronicles. If you're new here, subscribe and join us for new true horror stories every Thursday and Sunday. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious. See you in the dark.